2009's Fast and Furious is the fourth movie in the Fast and the Furious franchise with probably the most infuriating name of all the movies. I understand they try to be cute with the names. I get it. They've continued to do that even till now. But Fast and Furious, okay, first of all, I want to talk about the first time I ever found out about this movie. So I remember I went to go watch a UFC pay-per-view sometime in 2009. It may have actually even been UFC 100 or 101. And I remember there was a promo for the upcoming movie Fast and Furious. And I'm like, wait a minute. I've already seen the Fast and the Furious. That movie came out like 8 years prior. No, I was wrong. This is the fourth movie, but they call it Fast and Furious because it's almost like they're saying we're going back to basics. You know, we're going back to what got us here, which is the original characters from the first film and the original actors. Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Michelle Rodriguez, and Jordana Brewster, right? It's like a soft reboot in a way. It's not really a soft reboot, but in a way it is because it was slowly beginning to continue that transition that really began with Too Fast, Too Furious, from being these enthusiastic street racing love fest to being this over-the-top near-death experience heist films that the franchise would become. This movie was the producers hitting the brakes, see the pun? See the pun there? Hitting the brakes and going back to what got us there and sort of restarting the franchise, recognizing the mistakes that they made in previous movies, like having different main characters and sort of making it a little bit of an anthology series, a shared universe type of thing, into the franchise at least being more focused on the characters played by Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, who do return as Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor. And what's interesting is it picks up sort of a few years after the events of Too Fast, Too Furious. Now, we find out early in this movie that Han is still alive. And that's basically them telling us that Fast and Furious takes place before Tokyo Drift. I talked a little bit about this in my review for Tokyo Drift. It was a strange choice and almost like they were trying to keep Han around without really overthinking it. So at this point, Fast and Furious, even though it's the fourth movie, is the third in the chronological order of the events. But what's strange about that is that this movie is supposed to take place in 2009, but why is it that in Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, everybody has a flip phone, which very few people had in 2009? What was that all about? By the time 2009 rolled around, the smartphone, the iPhone was already on what, iPhone 3, iPhone 4, something like that. And yet it doesn't matter because it's whatever. They didn't think it through, I guess, or maybe it's not even a big deal. Maybe I'm overthinking, and if I am, it is what it is. Still, though, because of the name of this movie being so similar to the name of the first movie, now when they release them in a set, like the 4K set, the Blu-ray set, the DVD set, I have the 4K set for 1 through 8. They have to title the original one The Fast and the Furious, the original movie. And that wouldn't happen if they just called it like Fast 4 or Fast and Furious 4. And I know it's called Fast and Furious 4 in other parts of the world. Maybe it's because they wanted to kind of explain that it's not the fourth one in the timeline. I don't know. It's a strange choice for a title, and it is kind of annoying because I have to, when I talk about this movie, I have to make sure I specify that this is Fast and Furious 4, not The Fast and the Furious. They just dropped the. So one thing about this movie is instantly comparing it to Tokyo Drift, like I said in that review, you really get the sense that this movie is much better focused and the charisma levels are high. And I don't mean just from Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, who are the two main characters in this movie, but also from Jordana Brewster, who picks up her story with Paul Walker's character of Brian O'Connor in a very interesting sort of way, and Michelle Rodriguez, who has a pretty shocking moment in the first act of the film that set up things for not only this film, but for other movies after it. So they made a pretty bold choice here, but I like it because it was unexpected. I do like how the movie, being years after the first one, we have to catch up with the characters. We have to catch up with what Dominic and Brian have been doing. Brian is now back working for law enforcement as an FBI agent, so whatever he told Roman in Too Fast, Too Furious didn't stick. Dominic Toretto is kind of become a bit more of a fugitive, a bit more of a criminal, and he, because of his connection to Brian O'Connor for what happened in the first movie, which, by the way, there are a lot of callbacks to that movie. This movie, in many ways, acts as a direct sequel to the first one, even though it could be seen, obviously, after the second one. You could watch The Fast and the Furious and then jump to this one, and there really wouldn't be that much you're missing. I understand they introduced Roman in them, but if the franchise had ended with this one, just those two movies kind of tell the story of Brian and Dominic's connection, which is part of this story, because now that Brian went back to working for the law enforcement agencies, you know, and Vin Diesel's Dominic Toretto's become more of a criminal, it's one of those things where, the trust is not quite all there. But then, of course, Brian has to make a choice. You know, should he follow the law, which is what he's been kind of indoctrinated in, or should he stay loyal to a guy who he made friends with and keep his bond? So besides that, I want to talk about Gal Gadot. This was the first movie that Gal Gadot did that really gave her a lot of attention, playing Arturo Braga's, his liaison or whatever. She looked hot in this film. Her and Dominic Toretto have like a weird kind of love thing going on. John Ortiz plays Arturo Braga, who is the villain. He's basically a smuggler, and he has like this whole like drug empire, and very similar to the villain from Too Fast, Too Furious. So that was kind of interesting. And then we find out, of course, what Phoenix Calderon did, played by Laz Alonso, and that kind of sets off the story going forward. And it really shows, I would say, the growth of Dominic Toretto. But this movie's interesting because the overall feel of this movie is, it's got elements of The Fast and the Furious. It does have like two races, which is great. I mean, the scene where Paul Walker gets to race again, you know, it's almost like if you're watching these movies when they came out, it's like, oh, all right, we're back to 2001 again. That was a cool moment. But it also has kind of the espionage, you know, smuggling in to work with criminals type of vibe that we saw in Too Fast, Too Furious. But this movie also feels very much like a vigilante film, because really, Dominic is a vigilante in this film. He's a crook, but he's not a villain. He's actually a protagonist. And we as the audience, the way he's written and the way he's played by Vin Diesel, we want to see him succeed despite being a criminal. He's not a bad criminal in this movie. He's got his own quest, a vengeance quest, and he kind of plays the Steven Seagal / Liam Neeson in Taken role. But of course, we've got Paul Walker, who knows that, you know, Brian O'Connor knows that his job is to arrest a Dominic Toretto, but he also knows that and understands why Dominic really wants to commit these crimes. I love the sequences. I love the vehicles. There's a beautiful Dodge Charger in this movie that I thought was gorgeous. They're driving a Nissan Skyline. Like, there's a Chevy SS. There's a lot of beautiful cars, like always in these movies. They all have cool cars, and they don't all get smashed up, even though the final sequence of this movie they had so much going on that I almost forgot what the hell was happening. You know, it was very over the top. It wasn't as over the top as Too Fast, Too Furious. They did kind of keep it a little bit more grounded, and it felt like a true continuation of the first movie, but it was still another preview, another prelude of things to come. Still, though, this movie is way more grounded than the ones that would come right after, because Fast 5, Furious 6, and Furious 7, those three movies really take it over the top. They really push the accelerator, for lack of a better pun, to a new level of the franchise. For this movie, Justin Lin returns to direct this movie. Chris Morgan is the writer. And it's interesting they went with Justin Lin, because Justin Lin directed Tokyo Drift, and that's a movie that I felt, yes, his sequences were very well directed, but the characters just weren't written that well or even played out that well. Maybe because Lucas Black does not have the charisma to be, a leading man like a Vin Diesel or a Paul Walker. But in this movie, Justin Lin, you can tell that the difference was the script and the acting, because Justin Lin gets to play with the big boy action figures, if you know what I mean, and really put together a movie that has his trademark over the top, action sequences with a good story. The script in this movie and how Dominic Toretto's trying to find clues to solve this mystery, this murder mystery thing, that was fun. That was something I wanted to see more of in the Fast movies, and this is the first one to really, really kind of do that. The first one to really kind of have him and have us follow him on his journey. There's the future ones do this too, but this one they really kind of kept it like that type of film. It's a good little vigilante car movie. So the next one we're going to talk about is Fast 5, featuring the debut or the introduction of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to the Fast and Furious franchise, who would elevate the franchise to new heights as if it wasn't already popular. His character and his just appearance in this franchise lifts everything up. I also want to put over for just a moment Brian Tyler's music for this film. He did a great job. This same score, this same musician, composer, also did the Expendables movie, Rambo. Like, the guy's got a great, great collection of films he's done, and these movies fit right in. He is one of the kings of action. So those are my thoughts on Fast and Furious 4. I'll see you guys for Fast 5. Take care.